Hello, my name is Dwayne Durr, and my impossible is multiple sclerosis. In 2016, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I can tell you that from what I remember on that day, it was very devastating news. When I went the following, I think it was 2 days later, for a visit with a neurologist, that was even worse, simply because you get this bad news and then you have to sit in the doctor's office and hear the bad news all over again. They did run more tests, and each time that I had a test done, I was very optimistic and hoping that maybe this next time it was something else. Like maybe it was Lyme disease, maybe it was, this other neurological disorder, something else that could be, just kind of thinking about, thinking it could be something that was treatable. So as time went on and the test went on, and receiving that bad news over and over and over, it was like you were just being, you kept getting this bad news. You'd have this hope that that isn't what it is, and then you'd be told, yes, this test confirmed that you do have multiple sclerosis. So it was very hard. It was very frustrating. It was. I can remember being very upset and crying about it frequently. But in the meantime, I still continued to serve in my church. I still continued to be the best youth pastor I could be. I also, with my job, I drove a school bus, so I didn't know exactly how eventually this disease would affect me, but I did have concerns in the back of my mind that eventually, someday, I would not be able to drive a bus. So I continued to pray about it, and just let the Lord lead as He would. And I actually did not have any issues with my multiple sclerosis to an extreme side. The only issue that I really had when I was first diagnosed, and even for many months after that, was an issue with not being able to see sharp, clear vision in my left eye. It didn't prevent me from driving. It didn't prevent me from performing like anyone else. It was just that it wasn't clear and sharp as it was in my right eye. So in 2017, and it was a little bit before that, I actually ran across some research data where they were doing stem cell treatments. It was very expensive. It was experimental, and some people were finding improvements with their MS. Some people, it actually seemed to have stopped any progression. But then later on, after having discussions with many people, in February, I think it was, of 2017, my youth group ended up having a fundraiser where they raised enough money for me to have this treatment. I did travel to Chicago to have the treatment done. Didn't have any problems. And actually, after the treatment was done, I did feel a little bit better because I was starting to have issues towards the end of 2016. I was starting to have issues with like fatigue, headaches off and on, things like that, and trouble sleeping. I was having trouble sleeping. But a lot of that started to subside. Even the muscle spasms that I would sometimes get in my back, and I would get those at night, and that's part of what would wake me up. That's why I couldn't sleep very well. A lot of those things kind of subsided, and I didn't really have any issues. Lived a pretty much normal life. So in 2017, things continued on. Didn't really have a whole lot of issues, but I could tell that stressful situations or other things that were going on in my life would actually cause me to be tired. It would cause me to be fatigued. I went on through 2017, and there's a lot more details. If you actually have time, you can look at my website and you can read more details about that story. But I was not seeing a neurologist at the time. I actually was not taking any medication for MS. I had pretty much decided to leave it up to the Lord and let Him continue to lead and guide me into the direction that He had for me and this disease. So, did pretty well through 2017, and then in 2018, I could actually start telling that things were changing. Life was getting a little bit harder. When you saw me out and about, you wouldn't think anything was wrong, but it started to become a struggle every day. My fatigue got worse. My sleeping got even worse. I did a lot more praying because I could just tell that things were getting worse. But I had did a lot of things also to change my lifestyle and how I was feeding my body. That is some more information that you can read about on my website. But then in December of 2018, I had a minor car accident, and that car accident injured my lower back. I had treatment for that for 6 months, but during that, from December of 18 until May of 2019, I actually had some issues where, well, in April, right around April 20th of 2020, I had an episode where I woke up and I could not walk. I mean, I could get out of bed and I could take a few steps, but after I got so far, I would just lay in the floor. Thankfully, I didn't just collapse in the floor, but I couldn't walk. And, I could get up again, like after I laid there for a few minutes, I could get up again and I could walk a little bit further, but it was very trying. The place where I was living at the time had stairs that went straight up to the next level where you exited, and I did well to walk across the floor, and going up and down stairs was almost impossible. So I got very upset over that because it just really made me start thinking even more, what am I going to do? Also, I had been involved with the children's ministry here at church, and I had to miss a couple of weeks because of not being able to walk. I missed a week of work because of not being able to walk. I wasn't even going to attempt to drive a car. I had friends that ran errands for me, that picked up what I needed. So I started thinking, what if this doesn't improve? What am I going to do? What am I going to do as far as working? I had sent out a message, and I believe I had contacted some people on Facebook and just asked them to pray. I probably really should have went back and seen a neurologist, but because that relationship was destroyed in such a way that it actually brought me great anxiety to go back to see a neurologist. So I just continued to pray, did the best I could. I was still in a brace from the car accident. I had been prescribed a couple of drugs to help with that. So I continued to take that medication. I continued to try to feed my body the right things. And I continued to pray. I just left it up to the Lord and said, hey, God, I really need your help. So right around April 19th of 2019, I started regaining my ability to walk. So that was a huge praise. So that episode of not walking only lasted about 2 weeks. The only thing that I was concerned about was driving, because I hadn't driven in 2 weeks and my feet and stuff still kind of felt funny. I was like, should I drive? Is that the safe thing to do? Of course, when I would call and talk to my mom, she was always concerned about whether or not I was driving, how was I getting things, that type of stuff. So on April 21st of 2020, I did decide to return to church, and I will share in another video what God did on that day. That day was a big day because at that point I really knew that God had another plan. So I encourage you to watch that video. So I had a really good friend here that goes to church, that she goes to Cleveland Clinic, and she encouraged me that even though it was a little bit of a drive and it was going to take a little bit more effort, that I should really consider scheduling an appointment with them. With not being able to walk, I knew at that point it was time. So I did get an appointment with them. I had that appointment in May of 19. They were very thorough, and they did not say, this is what you got to do. If you don't do this, you're going to be disabled, and go down that whole road. Instead, they explained that my MS was very aggressive, and that I needed to make some decisions. So I left there in May of 19, after that visit, feeling very good about the information that I received, and was still only left with the option of deciding what drug I was going to take. There was one that they specifically recommended. I told them that I would review the information and that I would let them know when I had a decision. They said, hey, if I don't hear from you within the next month, I'll definitely be following up with you. So they didn't follow up, and I don't know why. I found that to be odd. I think the doctor that I was seeing was just too busy. But I did fine until December of 19. And in December of 19, well, let me back up. So before I made it to Cleveland, and with everything that was going on in my life, I actually had decided to give up student ministry. I just could not physically and mentally do that effectively anymore, so I did give that up. The Lord in November of 17 did take me away from driving a bus and put me back into a corporate job, a regular job, and it was a job that I was able to do at a desk, and although it had its stressful moments, overall it was much more manageable than driving a bus every day. So anyways, back to 2019. So December of 2019, I had done some things earlier that, like in the fall of 2019, I had did some things to change my diet. I noticed some improvement, but then I had an infection which really sent my body over the edge, and I could tell that my MS was starting to be aggressive again. My immune system was attacking my nervous system. So I called my neurologist at the Cleveland Clinic, and I was just calling to get a refill on some steroids, but I actually ended up having a conversation with my neurologist by phone, and he was strongly encouraging me to start an MS medication, which I was not ready to do, and he also did not want to prescribe a steroid. And so then I started talking to them about having HSCT, which is a procedure where they extract your stem cells and then they destroy your immune system and then put your stem cells back in to give you a new immune system. So much more risky procedure. I had actually applied for that in the summer of 2019 at Chicago, where they were doing a clinical trial for it, but they were also treating people off trial. So I did not make the cut, not because I wasn't eligible. They felt that I was would have been a good candidate for it, but the doctor that was in charge of that program decided to stop and write a book and educate the medical community on how to halt MS, which I really wanted him to do. but I was really disappointed that I did not make it in before he stopped doing that procedure. So then I did find out that Cleveland was getting involved in this clinical trial, and it was fairly new, and I knew what doctor was in charge. And the doctor I had at that time, when I was talking to him, he said, I tell you what, sounds like that we've kind of had a misunderstanding here, and I do not want to, I want you to be thoroughly informed, and I want you to be comfortable with your decision. So I will let you see anyone else in our neurological department to get a second opinion, and I will let you do that and not let them see your chart before you see them, so they can make their own, form their own opinion. He says, you just tell me who you want to see. And I said, well, are you talking about anyone? And he goes, yes, anyone. I said, well, then I want to see Dr. Cohen. He says, well, why do you want to see Dr. Cohen? And I said, because he's in charge of your HSCT program, and if somebody's going to tell me that I'm not a good candidate for that procedure, I want to hear it straight from him, because he's in charge of the program. He was like, okay, I'll see what I can do, but I can't make any promises. Like, he pretty much felt like that I wasn't going to get an appointment. Anyways, about 20 minutes later, I didn't even have to wait a whole day. I didn't even have to wait an hour. It's about 20 minutes later, my phone rings. It's Cleveland. I answer. My doctor says, I talked to Dr. Cohen. He would be more than happy to see you. You've got your appointment. All you got to do is call the desk, schedule it, and you'll have access to see him. He said, now I told you that I wasn't going to mention your chart or talk about a lot of things, but Dr. Cohen did access your chart while I was on the phone with him. And just through our short discussion, he felt like that you would be a better candidate for medication and not the HSCT procedure. And I said, well, I'll come, I'll have my appointment, and we'll see. So I still was leaving it up to God to work through this. And so far, would I have liked to have woken up one day and just not had MS because God provided a miracle cure that was unexplainable? Sure, I would love that. But that is not the way it happened. Instead, I ended up getting this appointment through having a misunderstanding. So God continued to work through my impossible, and in January of 2020, I was able to see Dr. Cohen at the Cleveland Clinic. He is in charge of not only the neurological department, but he is in charge of the current clinical trial that they had to have HSCT for multiple sclerosis. So God continued to work even while I was there. I already had some walls built up just from statements that were made in the past. And when I got there, I found that the doctor that was with Dr. Cohen and Dr. Cohen himself were the most compassionate people that I had had as far as my medical care was concerned. After my visit, at the end, he said, I do feel that you are a good candidate for HSCT. He goes, but in order to get you into this clinical trial, you need to have failed a drug. So to buy you some time, I would like for you to take this drug called Ocrevus, which is done by infusion, and we will do a follow-up MRI. After you get that scheduled, we'll do a follow-up MRI in 3 months. Normally we wait 6. He goes, but if this is going to work for you, we will see a change in 3 months. So then we'll just go from there. So then COVID happened. Well, it was already happening, but it started getting worse. And things were starting to get worse even in our own country. I was able to make my appointments for the infusions. I did those in February and March. And when May came, so March, April, May, June. June would have been when I was supposed to go back. May came and they started closing things down, even doctor visits, except for very extreme circumstances. So here I'm thinking, great, even if I do qualify for HSCT, this is not going to happen because of this virus. So when May came, I called to make my appointment for June, and through my chart, Dr. Cohen had stated, let's do your appointment in May. And I said, but it hasn't been 3 months. He was like, well, he goes, things are a little crazy with COVID, and we'll be able to see changes on your MRI. It's been long enough. You'll be fine. So just go ahead, make your appointment. We'll get that scheduled for May, and we'll get you in here, see what's going on, and see what our next steps are. So I made that appointment and had the MRI done. And most people that would be taking an MS drug, your hope is that when you have the MRI that there's no activity. In my case, I was kind of hoping that I would have activity, but I did feel a little bit better after taking the Ocrevus, as far as some of my MS symptoms. So I thought, well, great, this drug's working, but it's not something that I wanted to be on for the rest of my life because of other side effects, other possible side effects. I shouldn't say there were, because I didn't have any actually. So we met, we looked at my MRI, and he said, unfortunately, you still have activity. And I said, well, so what does this mean? And he goes, with all of the issues that you're describing and with what we're seeing on the MRI, he said, then, I do feel like that we can get you into this clinical trial. So I said, okay. In my mind, I'm thinking, I only want to be in the clinical trial to have HSCT. But the other part of that clinical trial says that if you don't draw the correct coin, then you have to take the drug for the next 5 years. And if you look at any of my other videos, you'll see the one, I believe it's in June, that says, where I talk about why I did not participate in a clinical trial. The reason I didn't participate in a clinical trial was not just because of the placebo thing, but also because of my conviction of the fact that I would have had to have lied to get into the clinical trial. So the clinical trial is only looking for people that will stay in the trial if it doesn't matter which coin you get. So whether you get the coin to be on the drug or whether you get the coin to be in HSCT, one of their questions are, will you stay in the trial no matter which coin that you draw? Now, I can be a clever human being and I can say, well, sure I would, knowing in the back of my mind that that isn't what I was going to do. If I didn't draw the coin to get HSCT, then I was going to find another option. Like, even if that meant going to Mexico to have it done. I mean, if I had to raise the money to do that, then that's what I was going to do. So I sent an email to Dr. Cohen and told him how I felt and told him about my conviction about participating in the trial. And I told him, so I'm declining the trial, but I still want to pursue HSCT because I believe that that is the best option. We already see that Ocrevus, one of the best drugs that's available, is not working. And I just don't want to keep going through all of the drugs until we find one that works or whatever. And plus, the expense of those drugs over my lifetime would just be phenomenal. So he totally understood. And he says, well, then it's going to be up to your insurance company. And we need to get another opinion from the transplant team. So he told me what doctor I needed to make an appointment with. Those things didn't go so well. A lot of that I think had to do with COVID and just them trying to schedule everything. So I went ahead and tried to make those appointments but wasn't really getting anywhere. I ended up contacting Dr. Cohen's assistant again, and Dr. Cohen kind of reignited the trying to get the referral to see the other doctor, and he said, we're gonna, get this set up for you. Just, watch for a phone call or an email or whatever. So I'm not gonna lie, I was very concerned about what was gonna happen next. So then by the middle of June, I had an appointment with the transplant team, specifically Dr. Miguel, and I saw him at the end of June, which I thought was really quick. I had to get these approvals from my insurance, and they were coming through like in 7 days, stuff that should have taken a lot longer. It was like 7 days, or something about the number 7. So I got my appointment with Dr. Michel. He did his exam and everything. I told him what I was struggling with and why I wanted HSCT. And he looked at me and he said, well, in my opinion, you are a good candidate for this procedure. He goes, but at this point, it's up to your insurance company because this procedure is still in clinical trials, and your insurance company may decide that this isn't the best option. I said, well, we'll just have to leave it up to the Lord, because it sounds like both of our hands are tied, and neither of us really have the ability. So the next step was pre-testing. So we had to seek approval for that, which meant, getting approval for them to do the pre-testing was also kind of like, are we going to do this? But just because they approved the pre-testing doesn't mean that they were going to approve the procedure. So I got approval for the pre-testing. The pre-testing was scheduled the next month in July. All of those tests came back. I even got some test results where I was like, oh great, this is gonna make me not a candidate. but then later found out that those things would not disqualify me and that it wasn't abnormal to have those things show up. So God worked through the pre-testing, but then they had to submit that to the insurance company to see if they would approve the procedure. That was all submitted in a very timely fashion, and within 7 days, so in August, I believe. I might have that date wrong. You might have to go back and look at some of my videos. Yeah, it had to be in August because, I'll explain. So in August, like that 7 days later, I received a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon around 4:55. It was from the transplant team, and they said, we don't know if you received your letter or not, but we're calling to let you know that your insurance company approved the procedure. And so we need to move to the next step, which would be stem cell collection. So in the middle of COVID, in the middle of craziness and everything that was going on, in the middle of uncertainty with how I was going to do and how my job was going to handle me being away for 2 long periods of time, I had to totally leave that up to the Lord and let Him work through that. So in the middle of all of this, all of these thoughts, all of these doubts, and like I said, in the middle of COVID, a crazy pandemic, I'm getting approvals. I'm getting approvals to destroy my immune system. I just want to make that clear. I'm getting approvals to destroy my immune system, to reset it in the middle of a pandemic where if I got that virus, that would be bad. Even the Ocrevus that I was on, and getting the virus could put me in I'm not saying it would, but it could put me in a very bad spot. Once again, I just had to continue trusting what God was doing. In December, I'm going to back up because in December of 2018, something also happened, or no, it was December of 19, I'm sorry, so I'm not quite there yet. Or no, I have passed that date. In December of 19, so backing up, December of 19, after it was during Christmas, after one of the services, I received this bracelet, which right now you cannot read it. Like, it looks like just a plain blue bracelet. But it used to have the initials on it, or letters that said, "What app?" which stood for, with Him, all things are possible. And ever since I've gotten this bracelet, I've wore this bracelet, and that's why the letters are gone. Because I did not know what was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to end up being on a very expensive drug the rest of my life, or was I going to have the opportunity to permanently halt my MS. So this impossible became reality. It was no longer an impossible. And my stem cell collection was done in September, and that was interesting. please go back and look at my videos to see how God was working through that. And then I went back to Cleveland in October, and that is when they reset my immune system. On October 29th, God ended up coming through and shining big with my impossible situation. I received my stem cells back, and that was the day that I got a new immune system, and I woke up and no longer had MS. I could already tell that my symptoms had went away. There were still some symptoms that were there, and I kind of had some new symptoms because the chemo that they used actually has neurologic toxic properties. So since then, things have gotten a lot better. I still have good days and bad days. My recovery will last until about November of this year. It's now 2021. And I have continued to have good reports. I have not had very many down days. I started coming back to church once my immune system got to a level where I could return. And, I did not expect to be where I'm at today. And I am super grateful, beyond grateful, for how God has worked through this impossible. And He's still continuing to work through the impossible. I mean, this recovery it's hard. It is. But He has made it so easy. And every time I have blood work done, my numbers just continue to improve. A lot of that happens also because of prayer. So I didn't receive a miracle cure as in something unexplainable, which that's usually how most people would describe a miracle. I like to say that I have a miracle that is explainable, but would not have happened without a lot of intervention from God. And He really did show off through this impossible. He did. So that is how God has done the impossible in my life. And I know that He's going to continue to do great things. I know this story is not over. And God didn't do a mystery miracle. He did a miracle using other people. He put all the right people in place for me to have this procedure done. And to me, when I look at all the people that are denied this procedure because it's still in clinical trial, I believe that is God doing the impossible. That is God doing something miraculous. So that is my story, and that is how God has done the impossible. Thank you for your time, and please watch more of my videos on YouTube just to see my journey. And if you want to read about it, you can go to rooftopprayerwarriors.com.